As part of the Fulbright Distinguished Awards and Teaching Grant, I've spent the past 5 months here in India investigating global best practices for post-secondary workforce readiness, or basically how schools can best prepare students for life after graduation. Uh, it was a very timely subject because both countries are really looking at different initiatives to help prepare students with skills, as both soft skills as well as technical skills that can lead to a career pathway. In the past, the US used the term vocational, which is what's still used around the world, but we've actually replaced that with career and technical education, or CTE, which I'll also use interchangeably in this presentation, primarily because of the stigma that's actually associated with vocational education. But I'd love to bring the word back. It comes from the root word vocare, or to find one's calling. And who doesn't want to find that, right? Why? Well, there's absolutely a need to relate academic learning with real-world applications. It makes learning applicable for students. It makes them less likely to drop out, more likely to find meaning in what is going on in the classroom. But it also connects them for a potential livelihood, life after high school. And why India? Well, India and the US both have a similar skills gap, which I'll be talking about in a little bit, that has multiple meanings. We also have very similar cultural attitudes and stratification within our culture around the term work. We have a hierarchy of knowledge that sees certain jobs being for certain people and other professions for other people. We also are both putting a lot of resources right now into this post-secondary workforce readiness concept. With the rise of the boomerang kids in the US and engineering students graduating in India only to become drivers, we're seeing similar issues that many different government agencies are beginning to look at. In the US and India, we also see a high youth unemployment rate, 2 to 3 times what the actual national average is. So demographically, we're starting to see the economic impacts of students that are not joining the workforce upon graduating. And by the way, this data does not include those enrolled in schools. So these are students, we call them NEETs, not employed or in education or training. Even students that do go on to school, recent studies are showing in the US they're often jobless or underemployed, and the same is true in India as well, with many students joining the informal sector even after having a degree. Previous education policy in the US was really focused on students going on to get degrees. Well, now we're starting to look more at whether those degrees are leading to jobs, and if not, what kind of skills and training we can do in order to address that. There's a huge cost associated with youth unemployment, particularly in students around 16 to 20 years old. It has both economic as well as social impacts on social stability. And it has a high personal cost to students who have studied, who have worked, who have gone on, maybe even paid for a degree, and still find themselves not able to participate in the way that they wanted to. Other concerns include the shortfalls of actually trained employees, in particular industries. India, for example, is going to have 700 million people in the workforce. If at the current rate, only 5% of those will be trained in any particular skilled area. In the US, we see shortages, huge shortages in certain sectors and abundance in others. And so we're seeing a mismatch. The work that I did while I was here, when I first arrived, I really looked at kind of the broad spectrum of vocational training. There's 17 current ministries in India that are looking at skill development and have a variety of different crossover initiatives. At the government level, there are some post-secondary schools like ITIs and ITCs, both the government as well as private, that focus on specific skill development. At the university level, the UJC and the AICTE, the All India Council for Technical Education, have been offering financial support for institutions that are developing kind of vocational training programs. But my real area of interest while I was here focused on the secondary school preparation. And so there's a new initiative that started about 3 years ago that looked at offering vocational education at the secondary school level. I took a look at this model with the help of a lot of different stakeholders, including at an international level. Many of the policies that India is adopting, many of the policies that the US is looking at, they come from other international models, such as Switzerland, Germany, Australia. Uh, and in my work, I've learned that there's really no best model that you can pick up and plop down in another country, but there are certainly best practices that can be integrated into all models, and that's the focus of this presentation. The five that I'll talk about, the five primary best practices, would be demand-driven, student-centered, 100% participation, work-based, and process-focused. The rationale behind vocational education, there's quite a lot of studies, and you can see those cited here at the end of each of these. But we see that reduced dropout rate, increased academic motivation, more likelihood to continue on as a lifelong learner. A lot of reasons why vocational education or career and tech ed has positive impacts both on the individual and on the community. But it has a lot of challenges. There's still a very negative perception of vocational education in both of the US and in India, and there's quite a few reasons why that is. Students are still limited as to what career pathways are ahead of them. There's often overemphasis on some specific career pathways, and there's certainly a lack of connection between the workforce and the classroom. These challenges come up quite a bit in a lot of different models, and in the best practices that I'll go over now, anytime that a practice addresses one of these challenges will be marked here with a star. First off, I want to talk a bit about the skills gap, because this is something that both India and the US have quite a lot of literature about. In my research, I came to see this term, skills gap, as actually having three separate meanings that relate but have very different indicators and also very different solutions. One perspective is that skills gap is used to refer to the skills that students are trained in versus what skills the industry needs. Soft skills are another type of skills gap. This is global competence skills like communication, the ability to work collaboratively, problem solving, critical thinking, basic finance, basic language and math skills. So these professional skills, which I'd like to call them instead of soft skills. And then finally, what skills and strengths align to which types of careers? So there's from the student-centered view, right? And these are more industry-specific view. What a student is good at, what a student enjoys, and aligning those with the different career pathways that are available to them. And so we use this term skills gap for quite a different variety of meanings. But we need to actually look at each of these specific three definitions when we're hoping to address it. Methodology, you see a lot of acronyms here. We use those a lot here in India. I looked at a lot of policy, spoke with a lot of policy makers, including those here in India as well as abroad that were here operating in India. Did a lot of curriculum review as new curriculum is coming out based on these new policies, including centers where these policies were being implemented. And interviews, a lot of interviews with different players as well, including school visits, talking with teachers, talking with principals. So started kind of at the top at the national level and then worked my way down to the local level. So let's take a look at each of these five best practices. The first one is demand driven. What this is, so data being used to actually look at where jobs are going to be needed, and then using those to devise the actual programming that's being offered in schools. A few things that this does. This creates that link, that necessary link between the education and workforce industry, making it more of a partnership. This helps address the skills gap, so we aren't just supplying beauticians and mechanics if those jobs don't exist. And finally, it identifies meaningful pathways for students. So students can see that they're taking this course because this will be needed in a particular job. Now, what this can look like, there's actually a lot of data out here. And India's done a really great job about a national skills survey where it looks at each state and identifies different skills gaps. And the US does this too at a national level. Our Bureau of Labor and Statistics often looks at job growth, and there's a handbook that's available each year. At a state level, states have, adopted models of different career clusters and where these different jobs are utilized, are kind of located within these clusters and the different types of jobs within those clusters that exist. So the data is actually out there. Are we using it? Are we using it? We have national data. We have data at a state level. But we're still doing a lot of supply-driven CTE coursework, where here's the classes that kids want to take, so we're going to offer them, whether or not they're actual job outcomes. Data at a national level also can't really determine local decisions. So what this doesn't look like is if I see that manufacturing is a huge need at a national level, but there are no manufacturing facilities anywhere near where my students are attending school, should I be basing my programming decisions on that? Oftentimes educators are the only ones creating new programs rather than industry, and advisory committees from industry that help guide programs remain at the program level. They aren't, they're there to help guide my agriculture class decisions and curriculum, but they aren't going to tell me whether or not we do need a manufacturing program. So some recommendations. On the ground, the creation of a localized advisory committee can help address a lot of these, this need to create a more demand-driven programming in our vocational or career and tech courses. And at the Boulder Valley School District, this committee could be formed by Workforce Boulder County, Boulder Chamber of Commerce, we have other Success Effect committee members, and this would create a district level advisory board. And these local leaders who are comprised mainly of industry and business can help advise these sort of program decisions based on skills gaps that they are aware of on the ground. In India, this can happen at the panchayat, the district program coordinators at the state levels, as well as the local district level committees can help guide those kind of practices. If they do this, right, they help us identify where these gaps are, then the assessment of whether or not we've done this successfully is that 100% of BVSD graduates, or in India, the National Skills Qualification graduates, are enrolled in some kind of post-secondary education, training, or formal employment within 1 year. So the NEET percentage would be 0 because we've looked at the different opportunities that exist within our community and developed some sort of partnership between schools and workforce. But that alone can't help, right? There's still a few missing links on that bridge. One of them is the need for programming to be student-centered. Students need to be given structured opportunities to explore their self-interest, right? We're not just plugging them into careers. And to use those opportunities to explore their own interest and test them in actual career-focused environments. So what this does is it lets the student kind of drive the process so that they are actually engaged in their own pathway. It creates a personalized learning pipeline, which we'll talk about in another best practice here soon, that lets them focus on some specific self-directed goals. And then finally, it exposes students to potential applications of academic and vocational skills. So they get to see kind of what's out there and how their ability to, they really enjoy math and how that can relate on the job. Again, we have tools that exist, but we need to start looking at it from a student-driven framework rather than here are some things that the state requires that we do for students to explore post-secondary workforce readiness. For example, we have a system called Naviance that is mostly counselor administered, but it shouldn't just be counselors or educators even that help guide this self-exploration. There should be community involvement. There should definitely be some input from industry and expert partners. Students begin to know a bit more about themselves through a variety of tools. For example, we could adopt the Indigo. I think we're test piloting this in some schools like Boulder Universal. And other tools and activities that help students really examine their strengths and look at the different pathways that could potentially be attached to these. So what this doesn't look like, right? We're not just offering vocational courses at the end because they've got a space in their schedule and they need to figure out, some kind of livelihood. It also doesn't only look at vocational education for students who are in a lower socioeconomic background or might not have performed well academically and therefore are assumed to be the only students that could benefit from vocational education. My recommendation to both my district and in India is to utilize existing online tools and develop further curriculum for student-centered and student-directed career exploration. There's a couple of different ways that this can look in my district. The most important being that all of this could be completed within the existing framework of the individualized career and academic plan, where this is not in addition to, but a way to help support those sort of goals. And in India, the PSS, Central Institute for Vocational Education, is currently already developing curriculum and curriculum modules for different vocational areas. So they could continue this